Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Hey there, just before we get into the podcast, a quick reminder, we could use your financial help. Please support us on Patreon so we can keep on keeping on. Check the Patreon links to donate. Hope you enjoy this episode. And this is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, coming up to the Canadian federal election. With us today, from back in Ottawa, John Ivison, a columnist, political reporter with the Post Media Group, and also an author of a book, a timely book that's just out, called Trudeau, The Education of a Prime Minister. We'll get to that in a moment. But first of all, John, thank you very much for being with us today. I know we've been trying this for a while, but you're very busy with what you do. So first of all, what do you do to get started in the morning? Do you have tea or coffee or shot of whiskey or what?
I have a 8-month-old baby, so I don't have any problem in that regard. I'm up with a lark.
Yep. Tell me about your early life. You're here in Canada now, but you started out in Scotland?
Yeah, I'm from Dumfries, Scotland. I came over to Canada in 1988 to study. And I went back a couple of times, but I guess the bug bit me, and I have been here. I emigrated in '98 when the National Post launched, and I covered finance, and then Queen's Park, the Ontario Legislature, and then moved on to Parliament Hill in 2003, where I've been ever since.
So what's a typical day like in the life of John Ivison, or is there a typical day?
Well, right now there's no typical day. It's pretty chaotic. I've spent 2 weeks with the Conservatives, and then on Friday morning I'm going out with Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and we're going right through to Election Day. 12 days. I guess who knows where we're going to have Thanksgiving dinner, but it's not going to be at home.
Oh no.
So yeah, typical is not in the vocabulary at the moment.
Exactly. So where'd you get your start in the writing game?
I worked in a magazine in Glasgow. I had graduated from Glasgow University, McMaster University in Hamilton, Ontario, and went back to Glasgow and walked into one of these starter magazine jobs, and eventually I graduated to the Scotsman newspaper, which, if people don't know it, if they've ever been to Edinburgh and you look up from Princess Street in Edinburgh towards the castle, and then along a bit is the Scotsman. It looks right over the centre of Edinburgh. It's Scotland's national newspaper.
Were you in Glasgow long enough to form an allegiance to either the Rangers or Celtic United?
That's a question you never answer in Glasgow. If somebody asks, what's your team, you hedge your bets, because if you answer the wrong way, it sometimes doesn't go so well. I have my own team. My hometown is called Dumfries, and my hometown team is called Queen of the South, and I am a die-hard shareholder, and one day when the lottery comes in, I will go back and buy it and finance it.
Okay. Well, that's a great ambition. John Ivison is with us here on Talking Books and Writing and Stuff from Ottawa. Ottawa, of course, center of attention for most people these days with the election on the horizon. But more importantly, you have a book that's been out a couple of weeks now. I'll say a bit more than that, maybe. It's called Trudeau, The Education of a Prime Minister. What drew you to doing all the work that would go into putting together a book about Justin Trudeau?
Well, I was approached by a publisher. I had been asked about a Harper book prior to that. And to be honest, the idea did not appeal because, I'm writing 4 columns a week for the National Post and the Post Media chain. The idea of going home, having written for 8 hours, to write for another 4 hours is not appealing unless you've got a pretty compelling subject matter. And, I think with Harper, pretty much what you saw was what you got. It was not a dramatic story, and the idea didn't appeal to me. But Trudeau was a different matter. I think that the whole story from birth to the present day has been dramatic, a reflection of his dramatic personality, never dull, and very polarizing. I think everybody has an opinion on Trudeau, and it just seemed to me to be a quite a compelling narrative and one that I would like to write. So, given the fact there hadn't been a book on Trudeau, and not one that was he'd written one himself, that was really the only comprehensive book. So I decided to have a go at it. It was never designed to be the sort of be all and end all, because given the fact that he's still in power, it's not like you can go to the library and look up some of the secondary sources, the court documents, the memoirs of people who were in his cabinet. None of that is out yet. So this was really a first draft at history, or a second draft, I guess, if you take the newspapers and Twitter to be the first draft. But it really was meant to be a pre-election. Here's the story so far. Things that people don't remember. And a lot of people have come up to me and said, I'd forgotten about that story that happened 4 years ago, because there have been so many things that have happened with this guy. It's just one thing after another.
One thing, I know. And what drew my attention to, I've been reading your columns quite often, most of the time, when we still get the newspaper at home in our house. And you started off by saying, on book writing, this is John Ivison in a column from a couple months back, on book writing, as on a great many other things, Winston Churchill had it right. What starts out as an amusement quickly becomes a mistress, then a master, and finally a tyrant. Did you find that all the way through?
You know what? I was kind of milking it a little bit, because I found it relatively easy. It was easier than I thought it would be. I mean, I think, frankly, the editing process was harder. And, to jump ahead of myself, I delivered the manuscript around about January. Then we had the baby, and I went on paternity leave. And then, of course, the SNC-Lavalin affair landed. So I had to go back into the manuscript and add a chapter. So that didn't go quite to plan. But the writing originally was not so bad, in large part because I have covered him for, I've known him since 2006. So it was, and I leaned quite heavily on things I'd written before, because why wouldn't you? If I'm writing something on the day that it happened, my recollection is obviously much clearer than it is if I'm going to rewrite it 10 years after the fact. So, I think I'd done a lot of the interviews already. I was in full command of the subject matter, and it seemed to flow pretty smoothly. I think, I hope that's what most readers think too. But I think, if you start a subject from scratch, clearly the challenge of getting up to speed is much harder than one that if you cover it day to day for the last 15 years.
So you were managed to fit this new development into the book. That must have been a rush job. Not a rush job, but you know what I'm saying.
Well, it was, to be honest. I mean, I was in Scotland at the time. I'd taken 5 weeks paternity leave, and I was not here. So, while I tapped into sources that I had here, it was not ideal. It wasn't. If I go back and do the paperback, which is a possibility, I will revisit that chapter a little bit, I think, because there's information's come out since then. It was not perfect, but I think I don't think book writing is ever perfect. You're pretty much always up against time, logistical constraints, whatever.
Now, this SNC-Lavalin affair, I cannot believe the guy is still pretty much neck and neck with Scheer, who, can't even hold down a job, or so they say. Why is he... What's the matter with voters in Canada? They just slough off something like this. The top guy in the land ordering the Justice Department what to do, and yet, that's fine. And then we look at Trump and go, oh, look at that. Look what he did. I don't understand. How come he's still in the running? Yeah,
well, it's amazing that he, this... I think I call him in the book the Teflon prophet. He manages to slide out of these situations. You remember the Aga Khan thing, the blackface thing. All of them have seemed to have people have just glossed over them. And there's a number of reasons for that. I think his main opponent for Prime Minister is not that well known still. They've managed to throw enough mud at him on subjects like same-sex marriage, on abortion, that people are having doubts about him. I think his own climate change plan is not persuaded a lot of centrist voters that he's ready to be Prime Minister. But I think the main thing is, and this is something that Trudeau's best friend and chief confidant Jerry Butts told me, is that people want Justin to do well. Secretly or not, there's enough people in this country who watched him grow up and who like what they see, and they are prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt, which is a priceless commodity for politicians. And they're still giving him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, at some point they won't. It was the same with Harper. He did some pretty egregious things, command and control style government. He prorogued Parliament, which appeared to be undemocratic. He did a whole bunch of stuff which was okay with people till it wasn't. Right. I think these things build up like water behind a dike, and then at some point the water just goes over the top and it just floods. And then at that point, they're gone. It doesn't matter what they say or do. The public has had enough of them and wants them gone. And that happened to Harper in 2015, and doubtless it will happen to Trudeau at some point in the future. I just don't think we're there yet.
We're not there yet. This is John Ivison here on Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, talking about his book, Trudeau, The Education of a Prime Minister. A timely publication because, of course, the election is, like I earlier said, just around the corner. The impression out here is in the West, at least with the folks I hang around with, it seems like Liberals and probably even Conservatives, but mainly the Liberals, they'll do just about anything to appease Quebec voters, while pretty much ignoring everybody west of the Ontario border and east of the Quebec border. Does that resonate back east?
Yeah, no, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. And when you look at the electoral map, it's pretty clear why. I mean, Trudeau needs to get a sizable number of seats in Ontario, but he also needs to make gains in Quebec if he wants to have a majority government. And so they have been pretty clear that they will bend over backwards for Quebec. To be fair, Scheer needs to get more seats in Quebec too, and so he's been saying some sweet entreatments to Quebecers too. He's promised there'll be one single income tax filing, which makes some of us nervous, because presumably if Quebec was in a dispute with the federal government, or even was a separate Quebec government, an independent government, they could just withhold income tax, which would be a bit of a problem for the rest of Canada. So I think both of them have been saying things that will not go down well west of the Manitoba border. They had hoped that the Bloc Québécois was a thing of the past, and as we saw in the last two leaders' debates in the last week, the Bloc is having a resurgence under their new leader, and that is a problem for both of the major federal parties.
And it seems like the Jagmeet Singh is coming up on the outside, as it were. But a lot of people, my brother who lives in Ottawa, and a political follower to the nth degree, they're saying things like Scheer, what's his name? Jagmeet Singh, maybe Elizabeth May, they both make gains. Does that come at the cost of the Liberals?
Well, if Singh does make gains, it probably will come at the cost of the Liberals. I wrote a column today saying, he had a good night in the leaders' debate. He had a couple of zingers comparing. He called Trudeau Mr. Delay and Scheer Mr. Deny on the climate file.
Yep.
But this guy's Mr. Deficit. He's promised so much to Canadians in the form of free dental care, free pharmacare, etc., etc. He's going to probably kill the TMX pipeline. He is going to raise income tax at the top level. There's a wealth tax. There's taxes here, there, and everywhere. I think people have got to look closely at him rather than just saying, "Oh, he's a nice, genial, amiable guy. We're going to vote for him." There is a cost there, and if he's the kingmaker, if he becomes supports a Liberal minority government, then look out. Particularly in the West, I think that my main concern from this whole election is that a Liberal government kills TMX, and we have a major unity issue in Alberta and Saskatchewan.
Correct. I've got friends and relatives who work in the oil patch, but not only that, it just feels like after all these years, because I've voted Liberal many a time in my life, but lately I'm just getting fed up with all of the parties, and nobody seems to be able to make, instead of a can-do country, it seems like we're can't-a anymore. Can't build pipelines, can't get railroads built, can't expand highways, can't get bridges done, can't do anything except shovel money toward Quebec and then apologize later. That's sort of what people, I think, a lot of them are feeling out here.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that, and I think that that's the feeling in the West, and I think a lot of people in maybe right across the country in the centre of the political spectrum look leftwards and think that the Liberals are too far left, and look to the right and feel that the Conservatives are too far right, and they feel homeless, and they feel they can't vote for the Greens or the NDP, and obviously not for Maxime Bernier or the Bloc, and I think there's a dissatisfaction at the options on show at the moment. And that's one of the major themes of the book, that the Trudeau government has misjudged the Canadian electorate. It's felt that it's more progressive than it actually is, and the sheer party has not taken advantage of that because it's stayed too far to the right. And I think even if Trudeau gets re-elected, that point still stands, because I think it's undeniable that even if he's re-elected, there is not a great enthusiasm for what he's selling.
Gotcha. And this is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. The author of Trudeau, The Education of a Prime Minister, is with us. It's John Ivison. And John, let's go out on a limb. Any predictions for the election?
Well, I think at the moment it looks like a Liberal minority government. They may end up pulling a majority out of the hat because their usual trick is at the last minute to try and scare the Dippers and scare the Greens and say, look, the only way to stop the Conservatives is to vote Liberal. That has worked in the past. I'm not so sure it will work this time. I think that it will be pretty clear, it may be pretty clear by this time next week that the Liberals are going to squeak a win, and therefore people are safe to vote wherever they want to vote. There are a lot of younger people who want to vote Green. I think Singh's performance means that there are a lot of younger people who are going to vote NDP. I think that the number of people voting will not be anywhere near what it was in 2015. It was 68% of the electorate voted last time. The norm is somewhere near 62. I think will be near the norm. That will probably take most of those voters will probably vote Liberal. That they certainly did last time. So you end up with the Liberals squeaking out a victory, probably propped up by the NDP. That's kind of how it looks right now. There's still another week to go. I mean, there's plenty of time for Justin Trudeau to put his foot in his mouth still.
Exactly. John Ivison is with us. Trudeau, The Education of a Prime Minister, is his book. Pick it up if you can before Election Day, maybe even after Election Day, and see what kind of predictions or comments sort of came true following the election.
John? I hope that the comments in the book, and I think so far they're standing up pretty well.
Good.
Even though it was written 6 months ago, but the idea that Canadians one day soon will tire of Justin Trudeau's idiosyncrasies, I think that stands up pretty well.
Correct. We always get tired of the showbiz act. It's just like TV shows, right? When they jump the shark sooner or later. So. Well,
he's been on the water skis quite a few times already. He might not quite have jumped it, but he's had a pretty good go. And the blackface thing, for example, is quite how he's shaken that one off is quite remarkable.
Well, that could never happen to a politician, let's say, south of the border. You show up like that, and then you're pretty much gone. So.
Well, you would be, but mind you, Trump seems to be getting away with
just about everything.
Just about anything short of murder.
Trudeau, The Education of a Prime Minister, the book by John Ivison. We're talking with him today here on Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. You became a citizen, 1998? 98, you said? Or
I became a citizen in about 2002, I think.
Have you seen anything in the country change since you came here, let's say 20 years ago then, or actually became a voting member of society for Canada?
Well, I'm sure I have. I think politically the country is, people are much less trusting of political parties and politicians, and yet at the same time they've become more polarized, which is strange. That while they're disillusioned with politics, but they're also more engaged with politics, which is not a very healthy development, I don't think. There is a lot of skepticism about anything a politician says, and I think that this is a reflection of wider society. It's not just Canada. There's social media, things are coming out. I mean, there are stories that come out now on websites that have got no factual basis, and people believe them. I mean, there's this story that Trudeau left this school in British Columbia because he'd had an affair with a student. This was published on a website as fact, and people are now emailing me, why are you not following this up? Why is the mainstream media not writing about this? There's a conspiracy. Well, no, there's not a conspiracy. It's not true. Or if it is true, nobody has any evidence that it's true. So, I think there'll be some unhealthy developments in politics over the time that I've covered it.
Is this fake news thing, is it going to send newspapers to an early grave, which I would hate to see happen, but...
Well, you would think it would do the opposite. If there's so much fake news out there, surely newspaper titles have got hundreds of years of history would therefore be considered safe havens. I mean, that's my pitch to readers, is that we do not write fake news.
Exactly.
If we did, we would have been out of business long ago. So while this hate is on for the mainstream media, in inverted commas, that we always get it wrong, that we're all biased, that we're somehow in the pocket of the government because there's been this bailout money, none of that is true. Every journalist I know would boil their grandmother down for glue for a good story, and they are not subject to being bribed, corrupted. The idea that for a Senate seat you would suck up to the government. I mean, none of that is true. So I hope that sooner or later people have enough of this, the fake news, the rumours, the online conspiracies, and they come back to the home of genuine, real news and analysis.
Well, I would hope so too, because I mean, you can't beat it. People somewhere, when you're asleep, get all of the stuff that is interesting, and they put it together and they print it up for you and fold it and drop it on your doorstep. And it's big format. You can read it. You don't have to put your glasses on and hold it 2 inches from your face. What's not to like?
It's a daily miracle.
It is. John Ivison has been our guest. This is Talking Books and Writing and Stuff. John's book is Trudeau, The Education of a Prime Minister. It's in stores now, and it's election day just around the corner. So my hope is that you will get out and vote. I don't suppose you're going to tell us who you're going to vote for, John, are you?
I never vote.
You never vote?
I never vote deliberately because people accuse me of bias one way or the other, and it usually, it's remarkable how one article I receive letters from a Liberal and a Conservative, and they both accuse me of being in the other camp. And I can say with clear conscience that I am not a partisan for either party. And, people might find that rather controversial, given the fact that I, regularly encourage people to engage and vote and whatnot. But that's a decision I've taken, and I'd never regret it.
Now, is that federally, or is that all voting?
That's federally, yeah. No, I feel that if I'm not engaged in, I do write about provincial politics, but not to the same degree. So I do vote provincially and I do vote municipally.
Gotcha.
But I think that it allows me to reply to some of the idiots that write to me. No offense to whoever writes to me.
No offense.
But sometimes, I mean, and on Twitter it is an open sewer where some of the stuff that's said, and I don't engage with them, but it is pretty hurtful stuff.
Well, look at that, people. It's a journalist with integrity. Maybe there's hope for the rest of us yet. So, John Ivison has been our guest. The book, Trudeau, The Education of a Prime Minister. John, thank you for being with us, and have fun with the 8-month-old baby, because we have a 13-month-old grandson, so we know all about it.
You know all about it then. Well, it's never a dull moment, I'll tell you that.
That's right. John, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.